Rita pointed out in the introduction, I've been a dean for 10 years, so I'm sort of demoted to a part-time political scientist. I'm not particularly versed in the legal history or politics and religion in particular, academically. But I am the dean of a small Catholic college, and we believe that this college does great good in the world by remaining true to our calling and trying to live our call authentically. So we believe that in good conscience, we cannot obey the HHS mandate. So I was asked to speak on the subject of what the Catholic Church demands of those in power. And I guess I'm here as a representative of the Catholic Church making a demand on those in power. We're asking to be excused from complying with this mandate. Now, everyone who's, in the least bit familiar with the history of Western Europe knows that the question of what the Catholic Church demands of those in power is one that has been basically inescapable. The unforgettable image of Emperor Henry IV standing barefoot in the snow for 3 days, waiting for the Pope, hoping that the Pope would forgive him over his actions in appointing bishops. So we know that the answer to that question is, yeah, the Catholic Church demands a lot. On the other hand, there are some equally unforgettable images that give another dimension to this story. There's the image of Thomas of Becket, that meddlesome priest, who would not agree to the king's assumption of secular power over the clergy, lying with his head bashed in and his blood seeping into the stones of the floor of Canterbury Cathedral. There's Thomas More, the king's good servant, God's first, being led to the executioner's block on Tower Hill because he would not give his concurrence to the king's assumption of ecclesial power. So these images suggest that the church may demand as much, or even more, of the Catholics doing the demanding as it asks of those wielding the power. Now, we all know that it was in many respects this very entanglement between secular and spiritual authority that ultimately paved the way for our current recognition of the fundamental importance of religious liberty. To vastly oversimplify, the state, which had taken upon itself the right, and in fact considered a responsibility, to expunge heresy for the sake of social peace and good order, began killing people for unorthodoxy in their beliefs. Next, with the Protestant Reformation, people suddenly found that as their rulers chose whether to be Protestant, remain Catholic, or even more disconcertingly, become Protestant and then revert to Catholicism, what had been perfectly acceptable and orthodox in belief yesterday was now considered dangerously subversive and subject to persecution. Then, deciding not to let the bloody persecution over religious differences remain at the level of the state, after all, why should the king have all the fun? People began to kill each other over their religious differences. So religious disagreement provoked bloody and distressing war and civil war. And America was founded by refugees from this situation. Of course, they came to America not in pursuit of some general or generalizable form of religious liberty, but rather to find liberty to pursue their own particular religion and to avoid contact with others who did not share their beliefs. Over time, however, a general commitment to the idea of religious freedom developed in the American context. But it's important to remember that this commitment had two very different foundations. The first was a kind of quid pro quo justification for religious liberty, basically understood as freedom to worship. I want to practice my religion without being bothered, so I'll let you practice yours without bothering you. The basic fact is that no religion will try and gain political favor for its particular practices, and in return, society at large will, to the extent practicable, leave each religion free to determine its own internal practices without interference. And by and large, our legal system is very supportive of this understanding of religious freedom. Our courts support a wide range of religious practices that many citizens find repulsive, like animal sacrifice, or that in fact do burden and inconvenience the state, like religiously motivated exemptions for the requirement to have a photograph on your driver's license. These are expressions of the idea that freedom to worship, even in bizarre or incomprehensible ways, is the essence of religious liberty. Now, it's important to note the kind of freedom that is being protected in this way. This type of religious liberty applies primarily to those aspects of faith that are internal to the faith community and generally neither touch nor apply to anyone outside that community. They're essentially rules that affect only those who choose to abide by them. And the adherents of the religions in question generally understand them that way. So, as an example, a few years ago, we were getting ready to play Monopoly, and we had a new Monopoly set, and I was looking at the rules, and I happened to notice that the rules had a section, frequently asked questions. And one of the questions was, can we play by special house rules if we want to? Now, you'll be relieved to know that the answer is yes. You can. I sort of wondered, like, okay, would the answer be, well, absolutely not, under no circumstances. If you attempt to collect a bonus for landing on free parking, the agents of Parker Brothers will swoop into your home and confiscate the set and not allow you to play any more Monopoly. Regardless, you can play by any house rules you want. And the religious freedom protected under the quid pro quo justification for religious liberty is much like the protection of the ability to establish house rules of monopoly. So, to use the Catholic Church as an example, because I'm a Catholic and I understand this church better than I understand any other, the Catholic Church has many of these house rules. There are many church teachings which, while we as Catholics believe they're true and significant, we also understand that these are essentially arbitrarily true beliefs, that the Sabbath is on Sunday, that Friday is the day of penance, things like that. These are analogous to my belief that Chicago is the greatest city in the world. It's true, but it's only apparent to me because I happen to have been lucky enough to have been born and raised there, so I can't blame others for not having access to this truth. Now, one feature of these teachings is that all parties, Catholic and non-Catholic alike, understand that these teachings are relevant only to Catholics and not binding on non-Catholics. So, for example, Catholics don't eat meat on Fridays in Lent. While there are good and significant reasons for this, we don't believe that this is a question of natural law. If the government were to mandate that all Catholic institutions had to provide a meat sandwich for all their non-Catholic employees every Friday in Lent, yeah, we do it. It wouldn't bother us. Even on a personal level, if I had a friend who was staying with me on a Friday in Lent and she said, I want a bologna sandwich for lunch, I'd be happy to give her a bologna sandwich for lunch because, after all, she's not Catholic. So, if all the religious liberty is supposed to protect are these house rules, it's fair to say that the Church's opposition to the HHS mandate looks pretty thin, if not outright incomprehensible. In other words, no Catholic is being prevented from doing anything the Church teaches, and they're not being forced to do anything the Church prescribes. So the violation of religious liberty is not readily apparent to those who understand religious liberty primarily as the ability to set house rules for religious practice. If providing contraception is like providing a bologna sandwich in Lent, the answer, don't use it if you don't believe in it, sounds good and sufficient. But there is a second foundation for religious liberty, which is based on an understanding of the centrality of religious freedom for the full development and flourishing of the human person. In American political tradition, for example, this was assumed by James Madison when he wrote in his memorial and remonstrance against religious assessments, before any man can be considered as a member of civil society, he must be considered as a subject of the governor of the universe. In other words, this justification sees man's inherent and trans and pre-political relation to God, rather than social peace, as the basis for protecting the right to religious liberty. Religious liberty is good because it is central to the flourishing of the human person. This understanding of religious liberty takes into account a person's right to hold beliefs, but also their right to express those beliefs, because it flows from an understanding of the social dimension of human nature. Now, this transcendent view of human nature and religion as a response to nature is a feature of many, if not all, of the great world religions. I'm limiting my remarks to the Christian and specifically Catholic understanding of this relationship because that's the view I'm familiar with, not because I believe that Christians are unique in having this view. Pope Benedict described this understanding when he said, "The right to religious freedom is rooted in the very dignity of the human person, whose transcendent nature must not be ignored or overlooked. God created man and woman in his own image and likeness. For this reason, each person is endowed with a sacred right to a full life, also from a spiritual standpoint. Without the acknowledgement of a spiritual being, without openness to the transcendent, the human person withdraws within himself, fails to find answers to the heart's deepest questions about life's meaning, fails to appropriate lasting ethical values and principles, and fails even to experience authentic freedom and to build a just society. As this quotation from the Pope makes clear, this understanding of religious liberty is rooted in an understanding of the essential relatedness of man. Man's nature is formed through his relation to God, and his nature is both inherently individual and intrinsically social. This understanding of religious freedom anchors it in man's dual nature, citizen of both a heavenly and an earthly city. And it is this understanding that the Church is relying on in her opposition to the HHS mandate. This understanding addresses those aspects of the Church's teachings that are not house rules, but rather are the working out of the understanding of the nature of reality and man's place within it, which flow from the basic fact of Christianity. This understanding of religious liberty would protect the right of the Church to propound and to follow those of her teachings that are both true and necessary. They are accessible to all through human reason, though Christians find further support through revelation. I can't stress enough that the Church does not see herself primarily as a purveyor of a set of ethical and behavioral norms, a kind of how-to kit for achieving holiness and salvation. Christianity is not about rules for morality. Christianity is about the basis of reality and an encounter with the living God. All the ethical and behavioral norms, rules, and expectations are just the working out of these two fundamental aspects of the Church, in particular an understanding of the true nature of the human person. Pope Benedict, once again, in his book In the Beginning, says, "What is the human being?" This question is posed to every generation and to each individual human being, for in contrast to the animals, our life is not simply laid out for us in advance. What it means for us to be human beings is for each one of us a task and an appeal to our freedom. We must each search into our human beingness afresh and decide who or what we want to be as humans. In our own lives, each one of us must answer, whether he or she wants to or not, the question about being human. Now, human reason, by its nature, pushes us to ask these questions until eventually we run out of answers. Ultimately, every person who fully engages his or her reason will end up against an impenetrable mystery. This awakens what Monsignor Luigi Gisani has called the religious sense, an understanding that human reason itself, when fully engaged, points beyond itself for answers to the deepest questions that reason provokes. As Pope Benedict XVI explained again in his message for the celebration of the World Day of Peace in January 2011, our nature appears as openness to the mystery, a capacity to ask deep questions about ourselves and the origin of the universe. So Christianity finds people at the moment of surrender to the inevitability of mystery. A true, mature Christianity is born of an encounter with Christ that responds to our confrontation with the limits of our reason. It is through the commitment of our freedom, our fully rational freedom, to accept Christ's invitation to come and see what the journey he proposes entails, that the individual accepts the identity Christian. Christianity, thus, is rooted in the fundamental attributes of human reason and human freedom. So Pope Benedict again says, in him, Jesus Christ, we can discern what the human being, God's project, is, and thereby also our own status. The question about what the human being is finds its response in the following of Jesus Christ. Following his steps day from day, in patient love and suffering, we can learn with him what it means to be a human being and to become a human being. It is important to realize that this conception of Christianity that is entwined with the fundamental attributes of human nature is, like human nature itself, at once both individual and social. That is, man comes to recognize Christ as the answer to his own deepest questions, but that very recognition points him to see that he shares these questions with all his fellow humans, and so must respect their dignity and their freedom. Pope Benedict again describes this most clearly when he says, openness to truth and perfect goodness, openness to God, is rooted in human nature. It confers full dignity on each individual and is a guarantee of full mutual respect between persons. Religious freedom should be understood then, not merely as immunity from coercion, but even more fundamentally is an ability to order one's own choices in accordance with the truth. So according to the Pope, freedom and respect are inseparable. He states, in exercising their rights, individuals and social groups are bound by the moral law to have regard for the rights of others, their own duties to others, and the common good of all. Now, obviously, these basic truths about the human person, which the Church bases its teaching on, are of an entirely different character than the house rules described earlier. If my friend, eating her bologna sandwich, which, remember, I happily made for her without the slightest twinge of conscience, was sitting on my couch one Friday afternoon in Lent and said to me, "Have you heard the latest gossip about our boss and his drinking problem?" I wouldn't just say, "Oh, she's not Catholic, so it's okay for her to gossip. I'll just sit and listen." I would be called on at the very minimum to sort of change the subject, not participate in the gossip fest, and if the situation allowed for it, to try and persuade her to stop doing it herself. I certainly would not be behaving reasonably if I said, "Well, I don't gossip, and I think gossip is wrong, but since you do gossip and it's okay for you, then if you want a few more juicy tidbits, well, Bill Smith down the hall has some items for you." If the same friend told me she was having an affair and wanted to borrow my apartment for a trysting place, I certainly would not be able to lend it to her, nor would I be consistent if I said, "I personally won't lend you my apartment, but I'll give you the names of some people who would." Now, if I were to do these things, not only would I be violating the norms I should be upholding, the respect for dignity of another and the sanctity of marriage, but also, and probably more seriously in the long run, I would be destroying my own ability to serve as a witness for the importance of treating others with respect and honesty. If sometime later I tried to persuade my friend that gossip was harmful or that liaisons with married men were wrong, she would be unlikely to take my warnings too seriously, since evidently I didn't take them that seriously. Anyone who became aware of my willingness to facilitate further gossip or an illicit tryst would be justified in believing that I didn't really, truly, deep down think the violation was that serious. Because after all, I'd never act that way regarding something I unequivocally thought was wrong. I'd never tell someone where to get the gun to commit a murder or find a driver for the getaway car for a bank robbery. So this is the issue that the Church and those institutions which are committed to the teaching of the Church face with the HHS mandate. Objection to the HHS mandate is not primarily about concern to maintain sexual morality. That's an issue of catechesis. It's about the right to articulate a vision of the nature of humanity, of love, and the nature and purposes of human sexuality. It is also about the right not to be a hypocrite, not to have to say, "Do as I say, not as I do." And so this then is what the Church is demanding of those in power. Once again, Pope Benedict states it with absolute clarity. The same determination that condemns every form of fanaticism and religious fundamentalism must also oppose every form of hostility to religion that would restrict the public role of believers in civil and political life. It should be clear that religious fundamentalism and secularism are alike, and that both represent extreme forms of a legitimate pluralism in the principle of secularity. Both absolutize a reductive and partial vision of the human person. A society that would violently impose or, on the contrary, reject religion is not only unjust to individuals and to God, but also to itself. God beckons humanity with a loving plan that, while engaging the whole person in his or her natural and spiritual dimensions, calls for a free and responsible answer which engages the whole heart and being, individual and communitarian. The Church is demanding then that she be allowed to present her case that man is more than the sum of his impulses, and that freedom is more than the ability to respond to passing winds. Catholic institutions subject to the mandate are on the front lines. These institutions, colleges, hospitals, schools, charities, service organizations, are the way in which the Church both pursues her mission to serve those in need and presents her message to a broader culture. And these are the very institutions that must formulate a response to the HHS mandate. The leaders of these institutions are the ones who must carry the Church's demands to the powerful. And I have to tell you, the Church has chosen an unlikely, and truth to be told, largely unprepared group of messengers. For instance, speaking for myself, at least, college administrators are not, as a group, generally known for their outstanding boldness. So, I'm not trying to compare myself or my colleagues, and especially not myself, in these positions to the great saints and martyrs whom I referenced at the beginning of the talk. Honestly, I don't expect HHS Secretary Sebelius to ask, will nobody rid me of this meddlesome dean? And I'm sure the fact that I disapprove of this mandate is totally unknown to President Obama, so I predict my head will remain firmly attached to my neck, regardless of the stubbornness of my opposition to his plans. In fact, it does make me feel kind of ridiculously self-dramatizing to even bring up this kind of comparison. However, the historian Christopher Dawson long ago made this observation: the challenge of secularism must be met on the cultural level if it is to be met at all. And if Christians cannot assert their right to exist in the sphere of higher education, they will eventually be pushed not only out of modern culture, but out of physical existence. So we, for example, at Benedictine College, Atchison, Kansas, are a college sponsored by an order that takes about poverty. That affects a lot of the aspects of my job. The fines proposed for non-compliance with the mandate will eat up our resources very, very quickly. For the moment, due to a technicality in the law, the mandate does not apply to our insurance plan. However, that's likely to change in the relatively near future. At that point, we're going to face a choice. Either comply with the mandate, and in so doing, destroy our ability to effectively witness for the Church's understanding of the human person, the nature of love, openness to life, and the meaning of marriage, or to defy that mandate and preside over the relatively rapid depletion of our resources to the point that we will no longer be able to operate. In this situation, the Pope's characterization of our time is marked by the tyranny of relativism as a new urgency for my colleagues and myself. So yes, the Catholic Church demands a lot of those in power. She demands that she be allowed to articulate a vision of the human person that gives the lie to the reduced vision of man, of reason, of sexuality, that ultimately supports the structures of power that they benefit from. But this great country long ago accepted that the right of citizens to seek, find, and proclaim the truth, individually and collectively, was ultimately the foundation of a just and humane politics. And I can only trust that this great insight will not be forgotten, at least not in pursuit of something as essentially pathetic and trivial as free birth control.